Okay, this is the extra practice paper review sheet covering unit number 1. This is the first question, which reads, solve by factoring 2x squared plus 7x equals 4. If it's quadratic, the first thing we have to do is we have to get everything over to the left-hand side, and the other thing is the coefficient in front of x squared has to be positive, which it is. By the way, if it isn't, just divide every single term by -1, thus changing all the signs. Okay, so now we have 2x squared plus 7x minus 4, and I'm going to solve by factoring, so I'm going to use the AC method. A is the term in front of x squared, which is 2. B, by the way, is 7, and C is your constant, which is -4. So if I multiply A by C, I get 2 times -4, which equals -8. So now I'm trying to get a term that when I write the products of 8, they add to get the middle term of 7x. So one possibility is 2 times 4. Since my middle term 7x is positive, I'm going to put a plus with a 4 and a negative with a 2, which doesn't work, because when I add 4 to 2, I get 2. The other option that I have when I write out the products of 8 is 1 times 8. Again, the larger factor will get the sign of the middle term, so plus 8 minus 1. When I add 8 minus 1, I get 7, which is indeed the middle term. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the 7x with minus 1x and plus 8x. And then I need my constant, -4. So now I have 4 terms, which means I should group. So grouping, I'm going to group the first 2 together and the last 2 together. Then I'm going to take out the GCF of each binomial. So the first binomial, 2x squared minus 1x, I can take an x out. And if I do that, I'm left with 2x minus 1. Now, the second term, I can take a 4 out. That's the GCF. And when I do that, I get 8x divided by 4, which is 2x. And -4 divided by 4 is -1. So when you do grouping correctly, when you take the GCF out of the 2 binomials, you'll get a GCF again, which in this case, the GCF is 2x minus 1, which I'm going to factor out of both of those. And I'm left with x plus 4. Okay, so this factors out into 2x minus 1 times x plus 4. So I factored it, but it said to solve it. So now I'm going to set each of the binomials I just found equal to 0, and I'm going to solve them. So 2x equals 1, x equals 1/2, that is one answer, and x equals -4. So I get 2 answers for the first problem. They are +1 and -4. Okie dokie. Let's look at number 2. Solve by factoring. So I'm starting out with 4x squared minus 2 equals 0. Anytime you do this, you should ask, does it have a GCF? Anytime it says factoring. In this case, it does. The GCF of both of those terms is 2. So if I take 4x squared divided by 2, I'm left with 2x. And then a -2 divided by 2 is -1. Okay, since that 2 does not have an x with it, I can divide it off. And by the way, you can only do this with a constant. If it has an x in it, you can't do this, okay? So I divided it off, and I'm left with 2x minus 1 equals 0. Now the last step is to set this equal to 0 and to solve it, because the directions say to solve by factoring. So I get 2x equals a +1, x equals 1/2. So the answer for question number 2 is 1/2. All right, let's move on to number 3. Solve by using the square root property. Okay, so it specifically says I have to use the square root property. And I'm looking at 9x squared plus 25 equals 0. Okay, to use the square root property, I have to isolate x. So what I'm going to do first is subtract 25 off of both sides. And when I do that, I get 9x squared equals -25. Again, I'm trying to isolate x, so I'm going to divide both sides by 9. And when I do that, I get x squared equals negative 25 over 9. Now I'm ready to use the square root property. So I take the square root of the left-hand side because the square root will undo something squared. It's the opposite operation. And if I use the square root property on the other side, I have to be cautious because I have two answers, one positive and one negative. So when I do this, I get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 25 over 9. Now, it's a square root. So x equals, and I'm going to write plus or minus there. And I'm going to break up the square root because I have a fraction underneath it to the square root of 25 over the square root of 9. So if I take the square root of 25, I'm going to get 5. And if I take the square root of 9, I get 3. So I have two answers, positive 5 over 3 and negative 5 over 3. So that's questions 1 through 3 on the unit paper review. Thank you for watching.